Do ba 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 do do ba do boo.
Today, I, Ahmad Oman Hakim, will be presenting on duty of care from a valuer's perspective. A duty of care is a legal responsibility imposed on an individual under tort law that requires them to follow a level of reasonable care when conducting any acts that could hurt others. It is the first factor that must be demonstrated before a negligence lawsuit can be pursued. The claimant must be able to demonstrate that the defendant violated a legal duty of care. Individual well-being, welfare, compliance, and good practice are all part of duty of care. Breaching a duty of care requirement can have serious financial and reputational ramifications, putting an individual or organization under a lot of stress. Financial settlements can be reached through a personal agreement, but they are more likely to be settled by a judge. It is also no different in the valuation sector, as valuers are professionals which are governed by a professional body, BOVIA. They owe a duty of care towards their clients, both in contract and in tort.
The first step of doing valuation work is first to obtain the appointment letter from the client. Any valuation firm will need to get the appointment letter from their client before they can proceed with the following steps of doing the valuation work of the subject property for their client. Appointment letter is a document to protect both the client and the valuer from any fraud that can happen in the future. It consists of the details of the valuer, the client, the subject property such as the property address and owner's details, and the fees agreed for the valuation work, and also the purpose of valuation such as refinance, finance, auction, or even land acquisition.
Next is about the scope of work as a professional property valuer. The job scope as valuer is do the estimation for the market value of property, building and land, conducting the feasibility study to investigate the projected cash flow and profitability from the project development. It can help to maximize their client profit. Valuer also conducting the compensation assessment for acquisition and disposal of land and building. The compensation procedure must follow based on the first Scheduled Land Acquisition Act 1916. The principle of compensation can be considered such as market value of property, severance, betterment, and injuries affection. Valuer must carry out the client instruction based on the client requirement in Standard 2 MPS, which is part of the duty of care as a valuer. Valuer cannot do something beyond their expertise and their client approval. Okay, our next point is define problem. Define problem is stage of process for valuer identify his or her client. Usually the client comes from property owner, lawyer and banker. Valuer must know what the purpose of valuation requested by the client, such as for financing purpose, sale and purchase, acquisition, renting and so on. Valuer must set a date of valuation based on the valuer do a property inspection. All the details of property must similar according to real condition during the property inspection. Duty of care in conducting the valuation, valuer must follow the professional ethics recognized by the board at 242 and Malaysia Valuation Standard MBS. Next is about data collection. Data collection is a process to gathering the information and analyze based on our needs. Valuer needs study the market area of property in general, such as location, surrounding area, to identify the accessibility, facility, accommodation that provided at this area. Most important part, valuer must collect enough information regarding to the subject property during the site inspection, such as the size of building, condition, and anything that can be affected the value of property. The duty of care in conducting the data collection is all information must be transparent and reflect the actual condition of property. Owner can sue the valuer if valuer try to manipulate the data, and it actually against the code of conduct as a professional valuer.
Hello, I'm Arina and I will continue with the next valuation process, which is data analysis. Data analysis is a study of the prices of similar homes in the same area of a community as well as other factors such as the property's features and the area's vacancy rate. It is very important for a valuer to do data analysis before going to the next valuation process so that the valuer will be familiar with the surrounding, market trend and area of the property. Therefore, there are a few studies for a valuer to do before they proceed to the next valuation process, which are supply and demand analysis, marketability studies, and also the highest and bestest analysis. Duty of care that a valuer needs to exercise while doing the valuation is to take all reasonable skill and care when valuing a property. That is why data analysis is required before carrying an inspection to show that the valuer has the skill to value a property with a good knowledge they have. The level of care and expertise allows for a degree of disagreement and in some cases inaccuracy. As a result, there may be on negligence if the valuer has performed its work honestly and diligently. Next valuation process is inspection. Valuers are expected to conduct a thorough inspection and referencing of the property to be evaluated as well as collect all necessary data regarding the property in order to carry out a physical inspection. It is important to carry out physical inspection so that it helps the valuer can see the condition of the property clearly and can decide on the value of the property. It enables the valuer to compile a thorough evidence base to get an accurate property value. Some of the steps in carrying a property inspection are: first, a determination of the property's condition; second, if measurements of property cannot be collected; third, assessing whether the property's stated characteristics are correct. Duty of care for a valuer at this process is by doing a proper and correct inspection. It is important for the valuer to make sure the details of the property are correct before carrying out an inspection. This is to avoid any fault or problem if the valuer assessed the wrong subject property. If the valuer made a mistake during the inspection, like wrong size or the number of rooms that may affect the value of the property, it will cause a problem to the valuer in the future. Therefore, the duty of care as a valuer is needed to do a proper job and ensure the details of the property are correct before submitting the valuation report to other parties for further action. Moving on to the report writing. Report writing is when the valuer starts to do the valuation report. When preparing a report, the following information is usually included. First, the purpose of valuation. Purpose of valuation is stated in the section of the report. Second, definition of standard value. This states the condition of the property is valued. Third, list of data that is considered part of the analysis. Various assessments are included in the valuation report to support the value of the property. Fourth, opinion of value. This represents the best estimate for the property's value after thorough consideration. The duty of care is the valuer need to ensure the reasonable and careful report writing. A reason why it is important to write the reason and report writing is to avoid any claim that can be arising from the valuer's professional negligence. A valuation report is crucial in the world of valuation careers. The report must be as precise as possible, as was used for other purposes. Therefore, a professional valuer is appointed to the report writing to make sure all the data and details about the property are correct. The valuer must have the necessary skill sets as well as relevant experience.
A valuation approach is the methodology used to determine the fair market value of a property. Some valuation approaches are more appropriate than others, depending on the circumstances. Since valuation is the combination of an art and a science, the choice of valuation approach is vital in deriving a reasonable value. To arrive at a value, data such as neighborhood and where the property is located are collected and analyzed. Valuers use three basic approaches to determine a property's value, which are cost, income, and comparison. In exercising their duty of care, a valuer should also choose another approach, which is called the cross-check method, to ensure that the main approach of the value is reasonable and viable. For example, a valuation report for a single-story terrace house for financing purposes, a valuer usually relies on comparison approach and can use either cost or income as a cross-check method. The Constellation of Value is defined as the process in which a valuer evaluates, selects and finalizes the computations and comes to a conclusion to reach a final value estimate. It requires significant judgment and experience on the part of the valuer. When a valuer uses a variety of methods, to determine the value of a property, he or she is using the reconciliation process. The valuer is the one who makes the final decision on the value of a property. The reconciliation process helps them to provide justification and back it up. Reconciliation is the final resolution and merging of the valuation methods used. This is when it is important to analyze the amount of data, its level of accuracy, and its relevance towards the subject property. The main issues that are overcome at this stage are the basis of valuation, selecting relevant property components, and also avoiding common errors. The selected approaches are typically then weighted to account for their relevance or significance. Some errors in the reconciliation process include disparities, logic, and also common sense. Failing to do so could result in unreasonable conclusions, which is the negligence in a valuer's duty of care.
The final step of doing the valuation report is report submission. After the reconciliation of value has been brought to a conclusion, the draft report will need to be checked for final amendments of the formats and grammars, and also the details included in the report before the valuation firm submit the final report to their client. Once everything has been finalized, the report will need to be printed and stamped with the company's official logo stamp on every picture value given, and also the signature of the registered valuer. The final valuation report then will need to be sent to the client according to the requirements written in the appointment letter received during the first step of the valuation work. As a professional valuer, they will need to do their best duty of care to ensure that the report is not submitted to the wrong recipient, and to make sure that the report is in its best state. It will help the valuer to be the best in their game, as well as to be a very respected valuer by others in the same industry. Other than that, the duty of care practice is also to maintain the professional knowledge and skill required to come out with the valuation report.
A do, ba do, ba do, a do, ba do, ba do, do, do.